He didn't wait for the ambulance doors to close before he asked her to sign. Vera Aldridge remembered that detail later. The cold November air still rushing in through the gap, the paramedic still pressing gauze against her side, and her husband standing at the edge of the bay with a folded envelope in his hand, not asking if she was okay, not asking about the baby, just standing there with that envelope, waiting. She had been 37 years old. She had been 7 months pregnant, and she had just walked out of a building that was no longer standing. The explosion at the Caldwell Tower construction site had taken out 2 floors and injured 11 people. Vera had been on the 4th floor reviewing permit documentation when the east wall gave way. She remembered the sound before anything else, not a bang, more like the world inhaling and then forgetting to breathe out. Then the floor was gone and she wasn't standing anymore. They told her later she had fallen 11 feet, that she had landed on a partial ledge, that a construction worker named Joseph had climbed down to her before the fire department arrived and held her hand, and told her his daughter's name was Vera too, which she did not remember but believed because it was exactly the kind of detail that only real things have. What she remembered was waking up in the ambulance, with her hand pressed to her stomach and the baby moving, one small, insistent kick, and thinking, okay, we're still here. She did not remember her husband arriving at the scene. She did not remember him speaking to the paramedics or riding with her or asking any of the questions a person asks when the person they love has nearly died. What she remembered was the envelope. Vera. His voice was flat, almost apologetic, the way people sound when they're inconvenienced and don't want to be blamed for it. I need you to look at this before we get to the hospital. She had looked at him instead, at his face, at the way he wasn't quite meeting her eyes. His name was Leonard Ashton. She had married him 6 years ago in a garden outside Savannah, with her grandmother's ring and wildflowers in her hair. He had cried at the altar. She had believed completely that the tears were real. "What is that?" she said. "It wasn't a question. It's paperwork." He finally looked at her. "I'm sorry. I know the timing is. I know. But my attorney says the longer we wait, the more complicated the asset situation becomes. And with the baby coming, Leonard, there are provisions that need to be in place before." "Leonard." Her voice didn't shake. That surprised her. "Are you asking me to sign divorce papers right now?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The paramedic, a young woman with red hair and an expression that had gone very still, kept her eyes on the monitor. She did not look at Leonard. She did not look at Vera. She was very professional about the whole thing, which Vera would think about later. The way you think about small kindnesses after disasters. Vera turned her face toward the window. She watched the Atlanta skyline move past in the dark. She put her hand back on her stomach and felt the baby shift. A slow, deliberate roll, like a question. She did not sign anything that night. What Leonard did not know, what he had never bothered to learn in 6 years of marriage, because he had never thought it mattered, was that Vera Aldridge had not taken his last name. She had kept Aldridge. He had called it a feminist thing, and teased her about it once at a dinner party, and she had smiled and let it go, because she was good at letting things go that she didn't feel like explaining. The truth was simpler than feminism. The truth was that Aldridge was her grandmother's name, and her grandmother had left her things. Specifically, her grandmother had left her 42 acres of land in Whitfield County, a property portfolio in 3 states, and controlling interest in a private land trust that had been quietly appreciating for 30 years, while Vera's grandmother told everyone she was just a retired schoolteacher with a small savings account. Dorothy Aldridge had been many things. Modest was not one of them. Strategic was closer. Vera had never told Leonard about the trust. Not because she was hiding it, or not only because she was hiding it, but because in the early years she hadn't thought it was relevant. And in the later years she had started to understand, slowly and then all at once, what kind of man she had married. And you do not hand a man like Leonard a ladder when you're standing in a hole he dug. She understood this clearly. By the time she was lying in a hospital bed in the maternal fetal unit at Emory, hooked to a monitor 28 weeks, along with a daughter she had already named in her head, Josephine, after no one in particular, and also now after the construction worker who had held her hand. Her attending physician was a small, precise woman named Dr. Yoon, who spoke in complete sentences and did not waste words. She told Vera that the fall had caused a minor placental abruption, that they were monitoring carefully, that bed rest was non-negotiable for the foreseeable future, that the baby was, at this moment, doing fine and that they intended to keep it that way. "And your stress levels, doctor," Ewan said, looking at the chart rather than at Vera, "need to come down significantly." "Working on it," Vera said. Leonard had not come to the hospital that night. He had texted at 11 p.m. "Heard you're stable. Get some rest. We can talk tomorrow." She had read the message 3 times. Then she had set the phone face down on the bedside table and called her attorney instead. Her attorney was a woman named Patricia Walsh. No, not Patricia. The names were different now. Her attorney was a woman she had met 7 years ago at a closing for a commercial property in Buckhead. And they had stayed in touch because they were both the kind of women who stay in touch with people who are good at what they do. Her name was Simone Okafor, and when Vera called her at midnight from a hospital bed, Simone picked up on the second ring. "Tell me everything," Simone said. "No preamble," Vera told her. "The explosion, the ambulance, the envelope." The fact that she had not signed. There was a pause on the line. Not hesitation. Simone didn't hesitate. It was the pause of someone making calculations. "He has an attorney already," Simone said. "Which means he's been planning this." "Yes. How long do you think?" Vera thought about the last 8 months, about the business trips that didn't quite add up, about the weekend in March when Leonard had come home different. Not guilty exactly, but careful. The way people are careful when they've decided something and haven't told you yet. About the woman she had seen once in a parking garage downtown, dark-haired and tall, who had looked at Vera with an expression Vera hadn't been able to name at the time. She could name it now. It was pity. "Long enough," Vera said. "Okay." She could hear Simone moving, papers shifting, a lamp clicking on somewhere. "You haven't signed anything." "Nothing good. And the trust is still structured the way your grandmother set it up." "I had it reviewed in January. Nothing's changed." Another pause. Then, "Vera, he doesn't know, no? Does anyone know? Any of his people?" "I haven't told anyone." Simone made a sound that was not quite a laugh, more like the exhale of someone who has just realized they have better cards than they thought. "All right, here's what you're going to do. Nothing. You're going to lie in that hospital bed and rest and take care of your daughter. I'll handle everything else. Don't respond to his texts. Don't let him send anyone to that room without calling me first. And if he shows up in person—" "He won't," Vera said. She was right. He didn't. Leonard's attorney was a man named Richard Halsey, who had a reputation for being very good at making women feel they had no options. Vera knew of him by name. He had handled 2 divorces in her professional circle, and both times the wives had walked away with less than they should have, because Halsey was skilled at a particular kind of pressure. Not overt, not threatening, just relentless. He found the place where a person was tired and applied weight there until they gave way. He came to the hospital on the 3rd day. Vera had been expecting it. Simone had warned her. She was sitting up in bed when the knock came, eating terrible hospital oatmeal and reading a document on her tablet, and when she said, "Come in," and Halsey walked through the door. 40-something, good suit, carrying a leather portfolio like a weapon. She felt her pulse stay exactly where it was. He introduced himself. She let him. He explained that Leonard was prepared to be very reasonable, that there was no need for things to be adversarial, that given Vera's condition and the stress of the circumstances, Leonard felt it would be best for everyone to reach a swift and amicable resolution before the baby arrived. He used the word amicable 3 times in 4 minutes. Vera ate her oatmeal. He outlined what Leonard was offering: the house in Annesley Park, 3 years of spousal support, full custody for Vera, with generous visitation for Leonard. He described this as more than fair. He said Leonard was genuinely committed to co-parenting. He said this with a straight face. Vera set down her spoon. "Mr. Halsey," she said, "does your client know the assessed value of the Whitfield County land holdings?" A small pause. "I'm not sure what, or the value of the commercial properties in the trust. Nashville, Chattanooga, Asheville." She listed them the way her grandmother used to list things, calmly, like reading from a document she had long since memorized, or the operating structure of the trust itself, and what a court would have to say about assets acquired prior to the marriage and maintained under a separate legal entity. Halsey's expression didn't change, but his eyes did something. A small recalibration, like a compass finding north. Mrs. Aldridge, she smiled. I've never been Mrs. Ashton. You can check the certificate if you'd like. He recovered. He was good. She gave him that. He said that the trust would need to be disclosed in any asset declaration, that it would be reviewed as part of discovery, that she should understand that concealment. It's not concealed, Vera said. It's a matter of public record. Filed with the county and the state. My grandmother established it in 1989. I've paid taxes on it every year. There's nothing to discover because nothing is hidden. She folded her hands on the blanket. What may surprise your client is that he never thought to look. Halsey left 45 minutes later. He didn't say goodbye. He said he would be in touch, which both of them understood to mean that he needed to make a phone call first. Vera thought about Leonard a lot in those weeks. Not the way she would have expected. Not with grief. Mostly, though grief came sometimes at night, when the unit was quiet and she could hear the sound of other rooms, other families, and she thought about the version of her life that wasn't this one. The life where the tears at the altar had meant what she'd thought they meant, where she had made a correct reading of a person and built something real. She thought about him the way you think about a calculation you got wrong. Going back over the steps, finding the place where you chose the wrong value and substituted it for the right one. She had substituted charm for character. She had mistaken certainty for steadiness. She had watched him be generous with strangers and assumed it meant he would be generous with her, and she had been wrong, and she had paid for it in installments. She hadn't fully understood she was making. What she would not do was pay for it in the way he expected. The woman, she found out her name eventually, the way you always find out, through a mutual contact and a conversation that was uncomfortable for everyone, was named Audra Sinclair. She was 31 and worked in Leonard's firm's marketing department, and Vera bore her no particular ill will. Audra Sinclair had not made vows. Audra Sinclair had not promised anything to Vera. What Audra Sinclair had done, apparently, was allow Leonard to tell her that his marriage was essentially over, that Vera was cold and difficult, and they'd been growing apart for years, that the separation was imminent. All the things men say when they want to be desired without being responsible. None of it was her problem to solve. Her one problem, was Josephine. Making sure Josephine came into a world that was stable and provided for and not constructed on the ruins of decisions made by a man who had looked at his wife in an ambulance and thought, now, Dr. Yoon cleared her for modified activity at 34 weeks. By then, Simone had filed the response to Leonard's initial petition. It was 17 pages long, and it included a full accounting of the Aldridge Land Trust, its history, its current valuation, its legal status as separate property, and a detailed argument for why Leonard Ashton was entitled to exactly none of it. The number in the filing was not small. Vera's phone rang 40 minutes after the filing was served. She looked at the screen, Leonard's name, and let it go to voicemail. Then she made herself a cup of tea and sat by the window and watched the neighborhood go about its business in the gray January light. A woman walking a dog. 2 kids on bikes. Someone putting out recycling a day early. Ordinary things. She had been missing ordinary things. Leonard did not leave a voicemail. He called back twice more that afternoon. Then she got a text. We need to talk. She showed it to Simone, who said, let me talk for you. The negotiation took 3 weeks, and it was not pleasant. But Vera was not required to be in the room for most of it. Simone was very good at rooms. Halsey, it emerged, had significantly underestimated the complexity of what he was dealing with, and Leonard, who had entered this process, believing he was the one with leverage, believing Vera was financially dependent on him, believing the house and the support payments were a generous offer she would be grateful to accept, was now learning, in real time, what it cost to not pay attention to the person you married. He had never asked about her grandmother's estate, not once, in 6 years. He had been to the Whitfield property twice and described it as rural, and not really our scene. He had met Dorothy Aldridge 4 times before she died, and been charmed by her, and then forgotten her the way he forgot most people who weren't useful to him. Dorothy Aldridge, Vera thought, would have found this very funny. The final terms were not what Leonard had proposed. They were not even close. Vera kept the house. Not the Annesley Park house, which she didn't particularly want, but the house her grandmother had left her in Decatur, which she had been renting out, and which now, with some renovation, could become something she actually wanted to come home to. She retained full control of the trust. She received a settlement that reflected Leonard's income and assets accurately, as opposed to the figure he'd hoped she would accept. Joint custody was structured with a schedule that Simone had crafted carefully, and which an independent family law attorney had reviewed, and which left Vera with the stability and the time she needed. Leonard signed on a Thursday afternoon. Simone texted Vera a single word: done. Vera was sitting in the nursery she had been slowly building for the past 2 months. Pale yellow walls. A white crib that had taken her 4 hours to assemble, mostly because she had been doing it sitting down per Dr. Ewan's instructions, and because the instructions had been written by someone who had clearly never assembled anything sitting down. A small bookshelf already half full, because she had a problem with buying books before there was a baby to read them to. She read the text. Then she set the phone down and looked at the room she had made. She had built it herself. That felt important. Josephine Clara Aldridge was born on a Tuesday in late February, 6 days before her due date, in a room at Emory with Dr. Ewan and 2 nurses and Vera's closest friend, a woman named Bex who had driven up from Athens and arrived slightly out of breath and held Vera's hand through 11 hours of labor without complaint. Bex was the kind of friend you find once if you're lucky. Vera had been lucky. Leonard was notified per the custody agreement. He sent flowers. Vera put them in the hallway. Josephine weighed 7 pounds, 2 ounces. She had Vera's grandmother's hands, long fingers, expressive, the kind that seemed to be reaching for something even at rest. She had a small, serious face that in her first hour of life managed to look skeptical and curious and deeply unimpressed all at once, which Vera recognized immediately as a family trait. She held her daughter for a long time without saying anything. The monitors beeped. Bex was crying quietly in the corner, which she would deny later. The February light came through the window at a low angle and turned everything gold for about 20 minutes, and then faded, the way good light always does, leaving something softer behind. "Hey," Vera said finally, just to have something to say, just to introduce herself. "I'm your mother. It's nice to meet you." Josephine opened her eyes, dark, unfocused newborn, not really seeing anything yet, not in any functional sense. But she turned her face toward Vera's voice with the instinct that babies have before they've learned anything else, and Vera felt something move through her that she didn't have a name for then and doesn't have a name for now. Not love, exactly. Love was already there, had been there for months. Something more like recognition, something like there you are. She moved into the Decatur house in April. The renovations weren't fully done. The kitchen was still in process, and there was a period of 2 weeks where she cooked everything on a hot plate in the dining room, which Bex found hilarious, and Vera found less hilarious at the time, but has since come around on. The backyard was large and overgrown, and she was slowly making sense of it on the weekends when Josephine napped, and she had 2 hours and a good pair of gloves, and nothing particular she was supposed to be doing. She had gone back to her consulting work part-time in May. She had a good client list and a reputation that had not suffered from being in a hospital bed for several weeks, because the kind of clients she worked with were the kind who understood that a person can be temporarily horizontal and still be the best at what they do. She had built that reputation over 12 years, and it belonged to her in the way that things belong to you when you've built them yourself. Leonard came to pick up Josephine on the agreed weekends. He was always on time. He was always polite. There was a sadness to him now that she had not seen before, or had not let herself see. The sadness of a man who had made a calculation and gotten it exactly backwards. She didn't feel sorry for him, but she didn't feel angry either, which surprised her. Anger required a kind of investment she didn't have anymore. He had spent it, somewhere in those ambulance doors, and those unsigned papers, and those weeks in a hospital bed where he had not come, and she had taken back what she'd spent on him and put it somewhere more useful. Josephine, at 4 months old, had opinions about most things. She had opinions about the mobile above her crib, acceptable. About the specific lullaby Vera sang, strongly preferred. About being put down before she was ready, absolutely not. Small and certain and entirely herself, which Vera thought was the best thing a person could be. Some evenings, after Josephine was asleep, Vera sat on the back porch while the yard breathed around her in the dark. Fireflies in June. the sound of the neighborhood settling. She thought about her grandmother sometimes. About Dorothy Aldridge, who had built things quietly for decades and never asked anyone's permission, and had left behind, among other things, a granddaughter who turned out to know how to do the same. She thought about Joseph, the construction worker, whose daughter had her name. She had sent a thank you card to the Union Hall, not sure if it would reach him. 2 weeks later, she had gotten a card back. "Glad you're okay," it said. "Both of you." He had drawn a small flower in the corner, slightly lopsided, which she had put on the refrigerator where she could see it from the kitchen. She thought about what it meant to start a thing, not to start over, because she had never liked that phrase the way it implied the previous years were waste. More like, to take stock of what was solid and what had been illusion, and to set down the illusion carefully, and to build on the solid ground. She had the ground. She had always had it. She just hadn't needed to stand on it until now.